is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 443. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me, as is tradition, on the bed sitting next to me is Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, we're in the same room.
That is certainly true.
This doesn't happen that often.
No, I'd say about 6 times a year-ish. The PTs, maybe Worlds, and maybe 1 or 2 other random times.
Yeah, if you queue for the World Magic Cup, maybe. But anyway, we're doing the show live for us from our hotel room here in Richmond, Virginia. We are on the eve of the Pro Tour. It's just 2 days away at the time of recording here. And, of course, this is a time where we get to dive in and get an idea of how Pro Tour testing went for Team Channelfireball and company. And also, we're going to use this show because Dominaria has been out for a little while. And we've got a lot of shows about Dominaria up to kind of do a refresher for the teams and maybe any updates or kind of what you guys came up with. And then also just answer a lot of your questions. We've got a lot of really good questions for the Patreon question of the week, and we often get overwhelmed by those. And I figured this would be a really good time to slot in some of those ones. So we're going to do those as well. First, I want to mention our sponsor, of course, channelfireball.com is the place to go for anything you need magic related on the internet. You also get access to a lot of awesome free content. That includes written articles. You can watch videos. You can listen to podcasts just like this one. And right on the front, I see I've got a draft up, so you can see how I punted this time. There's an article by Paulo Rosa called Forced Plays. I'm interested.
Paulo, I believe, I always call him the best magic writer. And, I just mean like the current best magic writer. I think Paulo is just excellent. I think he might be the best magic writer of all time. And, I'm aware that like Zvi Mashowitz is someone who did an awesome job writing. Patrick Chapin has done a lot of really insanely good theory articles. And there's plenty more. I mean, I do think there's been a lot of good writers. I think Paulo, he just really does a good job of just breaking down concepts in such a good way. Like Reed Duke does a good job of that too, but I think Paulo, is the best. And you can also read on channelfireball.com, by the way. So
that's right. Yeah, you get all of those guys. Ben's Dominaria draft that we talked to him about last week on the podcast. You can check that one out too. I put a link to that one in last week's show. And of course, while you're there, you can pick up Dominaria or whatever else that you might need to help fill out your latest concoction or draft with your friends if you need sealed product. All of that's available. They're going to get it shipped out to you quickly. They stand by their product. Just a few of the reasons why we love channelfireball.com. Also, the Patreon, that's, of course, a great website that helps you give to the creators that help make your life a little better and keeps them going as well. And we've been on Patreon for quite a while now. And you can check out all the details for that at patreon.com/limited resources. We're going to skip the Patreon question of the week because we're going to be answering about, 7 or 8 of them today. And instead, we are going to go to Crack-A-Pack with bonus Crack-A-Pack. I've got 2 of them here, and we're going to do both of them and kind of go deep on these ones. This first one says, to Banalish Marshall and LSV from DJ, Joe, and Dan, who I met at GPDC. Thank you so much, guys, for the pack. And let's see what we've got here. Here, Luis, you want to do it?
Yeah.
You never get to do it. How does that smell?
I can't smell it because my nose is stuffed up. I was sick all weekend at the Grand Prix last weekend.
But what a waste.
I got even more sick, too, when Shahar ripped Arcane Flight to knock me out of top 4. But
that was not a nice thing for Shahar to do, to be fair.
All right, we're going to start with Tellurian Scholar. This is 2 and blue for a 2/3 human wizard. Not a first pick, more playable than it seems.
Agreed, yeah. Definitely a little bit of a notch up from where it was, but yeah, you're not taking it.
Frenzied Rage, 1 in a red, +2/+1, Menace, not good.
Nope.
Healing Grace, also not good. Prevent 3, gain 3.
I boarded that in a couple of times, and it did its job against red. I do think that there is a small slot in the world for that thing to be a viable sideboard card that you shouldn't just outright ignore. But
I agree. It is a value-added sideboard card.
It saves your creature sometimes.
If you're playing against one of the rare aggressive decks, or a deck that just is really leaning on like Fiery Intervention or Goblin Barrage to kill your creatures, save a creature, gain 3 is a real thing.
For 1 mana, it's efficient, but really low on the list.
Relic Runner, 1 in a blue for a 2/1, and it can't be blocked if you cast a historic spell.
I'm running away from this one. This one has not impressed me.
I think there is basically 2 to 3 different decks that use it. These are like the blue-based combinations. Like blue-white historic is the most common, followed by blue-black historic, followed by aggressive blue-red that just happens to pick up enough historic cards. But I wouldn't first pick Relic Runner. This is more like if you start wheeling them, then you might start looking to draft that kind of deck.
Yeah.
Mammoth Spider, 4 and a green, 3/5 reach.
Kind of my boy.
Much more playable than it looked.
Yeah, definitely. It looked like maybe one of those interchangeable 5-drops.
No,
where
but
it's actually better.
Green likes it.
Yeah.
This is a card I think, well, we're going to get into kind of more where my team's at, but a lot of us don't mind taking this over Baloth Gorger.
Okay.
Just because
that's a big compliment. Yeah.
Green doesn't really need Baloth Gorger to finish out its games, where it does really want to have access to a Mammoth Spider.
Yeah, you feel a palpable sense of relief when you're the green-black deck.
Yeah.
Get one of those.
Drudge Sentinel, this is the 2/1 for 3 that you can give indestructible. Pretty bad.
Yeah.
All right, here's, I think, our front runner right now, Yavimaya Sap Herd. 2 and a green for a 2/2 that comes with a 1/1 Saproling.
Oh, yeah.
Green-black is one of the best decks, and the Sap Herd is just a very strong
basically
comment.
Basically a premium 3-drop, yeah. Just excellent.
We've got Pardic Wanderer, 6 mana, 5/5 trample. Pretty bad. Rampaging Cyclops, I don't like this card very much.
You don't like it, so what did you like about it?
3 in red for a 4/4. It gets -2/-0 as long as 2 or more creatures are blocking it. I just don't think that a lot of the red decks are in the market for like the mid-range 4-drop stuff. I don't like red all that much as a color to begin with. And the red,
it's the worst color.
Red and white are both pretty bad.
Too,
I like all the Sultai colors.
I always splash for white. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas Rampaging Cyclops, I think that the red decks that are good are the slightly more synergy-driven ones, like Blue-Red Wizards. Blue-Red Wizards is really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you end up with like red-black, like removal and vanilla creatures, like, yeah, Rampaging Cyclops does a fine job. I just don't really want to be in that deck very much. Divination. Actually, I think the second best card we've seen so far after the Sapherd, though I would take Sapherd over Divination.
I would too, but I have run a lot of Divinations and been pretty happy with it.
Yeah, this is a Divination format. Mm-hmm. And, before we make the joke, not every format is a Divination format. Triumph of Gerard, this is the Saga for 1 and a white that goes +1/+1 counter, ++1 counter, and then flying, first strike, lifelink. This card's really bad.
But only on your biggest creature.
Only on your biggest creature.
So bad.
This card, so I don't believe that this card's playable. I think
your deck is worse with it in it.
It tends to be.
Yeah.
It just opens you up to too much removal. It's just not very powerful. Damping Sphere is just straight up unplayable at all. Zhalfir and Void, also pretty unplayable.
Yeah, I think when we did the set review, I thought, in a 2-color deck, you might want to put one of these in. Hasn't happened.
Yeah, there's very few decks where...
Yeah, I just don't end up running
Basically, I think that if you end up with a 2-color deck with a high enough curve that you want 18 lands, and your color situation is good, you can run this. But usually... Like 9/8 is the average, limited breakdown.
Yeah.
You still would rather have like 9/9.
Yeah.
Or 9/10. So it's not like Sulfur Falls makes your mana better. So
yeah, it's just not free. It's just very not free.
All right, we've got a mythic rare that will be the first pick. Joyra.
Oh,
Captain.
Very nice.
She is nice. She enables, I think, a pretty decent deck, which is still going to be kind of like Blue-Red Wizards. But you're just going to bias towards historic cards and try to end up with like 6 or 7 historic cards. You don't need a ton. She's a 4-mana 3/3, and she draws you 1 card. You're pretty happy. All right, I get to crack open a second pack here.
Who's it from?
Perry.
Perry. Thank you, Perry. I met Perry at GPDC also.
All right, we got a Fire Elemental. Not great. Charge, also not great. Give your whole team +1/+1.
I saw a lot of Charge, by the way, at the Team GP. I was surprised to see it so much, but I suppose people thought they had enough tokens.
You're going to see it a little more in team events because team sealeds tend to be pretty synergistic. You just have a lot of cards to work with. Arcane Flight. Well,
sorry,
I did say that this eliminated me. This is a playable card.
Yeah.
There are plenty of Miser decks that want to play this and just suit up their snappers. Also just put in like the Valduke, like red-blue aggressive aura deck.
Yeah, which that doesn't come together much. The thing that I've seen about that is if you're prepared to say, I will cast this, I will use it to get in for, say, 4 or 5 damage, and that's like that fits the overall strategy of my deck, then that card's fine. It's just don't plan on untapping with it every time because Eviscerate
unless you're putting it on a cold water snapper, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, and that's real too, by the way.
But if this is a Lava Axe, this is 1 mana deal 4. Like, that's a real thing.
In most decks, you don't want that, but in some you do.
Some decks you do. Yeah. Cabal Paladin, the 4/2 that pings them for 2 when you play a Historic Spell. Don't really like this card.
No, don't either.
Adventurous Impulse. I do like this card. This is the green, the green ponder. You look at your top 3, get a land or a creature.
Hard to miss.
It is hard to miss. You did see me miss today when I cast this card.
I did.
This is one of the reasons to be base green. If you get to play 16 land 2 impulse, or 17 land 2 impulse, you're going to be pretty happy.
This and Opt have both gone up for me. They're both, like I described them in the set review, as the type of card that I like and I'd prefer to play, and they never end up fitting. But I've made room for both of those cards now.
Yeah, I think that what ends up happening is this format has a lot of playables, but the last bunch are so interchangeable that you just get some good value. And this is a format that I think trends to 17 and a half lands or so. I'm split between 17 or 18 lands, and having Opt and Adventurous Impulse gives you that half land without you flooding as much. Ooh, the next card is one I lose to a lot. Call the Cavalry.
Oh, yeah.
3 and a white makes 2/2/2 Vigilances. This card is
a very solid Magic card, yeah. Especially with Jousting Lance, that type of card that really makes those into real cards and can do it repeatedly.
Yeah, and there's just some decks that they play Call of Cavalry, and you're just like, oh, I've got 2 removal spells in my hand, but they are not.
I'm not going to eviscerate a Night token. Yeah, no, that card's real.
Speaking of cards that aren't real, Ancient Animus. This is the Pounce with a +1 counter if you have Legend.
Yeah, boy, that one's gone down a lot.
Yeah, the card is not good.
Yeah, it's really not good. The 2 cards that I like, at common are the Spider. Okay, fine. But the truth is you often want to kill a flyer anyway, and that's what the Spider's doing. And then the Baloth Gorger is another card that it's fine with. But, if Sapherd is a card I'll take above either of those, which it is, that card's not very good.
Right.
And, of course, if you're going to use it to try to get the counter and target one of your legendary creatures, you're taking on extra risk on what's probably your best creature.
Yeah. So Ancient Animus is just really not performed.
Yeah.
Power Stone Shard. I have not seen a good Power Stone Shard deck.
No, I effectively never run it. I see some people just throw it in we'll try it, but I don't think that's the right thing to do.
Unwind of the negate that untaps 3 lands. It's a sideboard card.
I sideboard it in sometimes. Yeah.
Deathbloom Thallid. I do like this. This is my front runner right now. 3 mana 3/2 that dies into a 1/1. Oh, well, we have one of the best cards in the set at uncommon here. Fight with Fire.
This is one of the few cards that's actually above most of the rares, too.
Oh, yes. Fight with Fire is just awesome. At 3 mana, it deals 5 to any creature. And then at 9 mana, it deals 10 divided as you choose, including players. This is one of the most important cards for Blue-Red because they can recur it and find it so often.
Kill the thing that's going to kill them, and then buy it back with Chronicler and kill you with it.
Oh, yeah. And you have Vidalian Arcanist to help pay for the kicker.
We saw that, by the way, on camera. We saw Martin Mueller kill, I think it was it Corey? Corey Burkhart from 11. He goes 10. He kicked that and cast Wizard's Lightning to the dome in the same turn. It's just like you're dead.
Oh.
And that was a game where Corey had complete board control. And if you're not thinking about that card as your red opponent starts playing land after land, you're like, oh, wow, they're flooding. I got this one in the bank. They do have that one card in their hand, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Get that Skin Witch down. I'll tell you what.
Orcish Vandal. This is the 2 mana 1/1 that throws artifacts. Not good.
Well, theoretically, it's never actually done it.
Yeah, that's true. Our rare is Goblin Chain Whirler, a card I hope not to see too much of at the Pro Tour, but wish me luck. This is the red 3/3 first strike, and it pings their whole team for 1 and them for 1. And all
good card, really hard to cast, though.
Yeah, and it's not even as good as Fight with Fire anyway.
Not even close. Yeah.
And then Grun, the Lonely King, one lonely boy.
He's going to stay.
Yeah.
He's going to stay with his friends the rest of the pack this time.
Actually, I think Grun is probably... No, I think Deathbloom Thallid is probably the second pick, followed by Grun.
I find Grun to be interchangeable, 6 mana spell, 5 mana spell, 7 mana spell, just whatever.
I think it's a little bit better than that. Yeah. I do think it's it is markedly better than Primordial Worm or the Baloth.
Definitely better than that.
Or Mammoth Spider. I think it's better than all those cards, but I don't think it's better enough that I would take a removal spell over it.
Yeah, I might take the Baloth over it.
I think you should.
They're so similar.
I think you should take Grun because the Legendary Matter stuff.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Really does add up.
That is true. And also, this is something that this is a mistake I used to make a lot in thinking, well, it doesn't have evasion and it's just huge and it just ends up getting blocked, which is true. That does happen most of the time. It is really hard to get through with the Grun. But the thing that I also recognized a few sets ago when they started printing kind of big, dumb green creatures is that's actually still powerful.
Oh, this set in
making
particular?
a 10/10 is that's really huge.
A 10/10 is bigger than, an 8/8, and that actually matters in this set some of the time.
Okay, so there's our Crack-a-Packs. So, Luis, like I said, this is a little bit different of a Pro Tour because we actually had a huge gap from when Dominaria was released to now when you guys are on the precipice of actually playing in the event. Normally, it's really compressed. I mean, and sometimes really, really, sometimes it's just a few weeks and you're kind of scrambling to get your feet under you to understand the draft format. This one had to be way different.
No, I've played in 2 limited Grand Prix already. And I don't even play in that many Grand Prix.
Yeah, I've covered 2. Yeah. I mean, I have infinite drafts. I know the people that are online that are really grinding,
have 50 draft trophies.
Yeah, they have. I mean, the leader today had 79 or something.
Dude,
trophies.
So, I mean, even if they're winning 1 out of 3 drafts, which is more than what they're doing,
and this
most
isn't
likely,
a competitive queues.
That's 240 drafts.
It's insane.
So
yeah. So how did that change things for you guys coming in? Was there less of an emphasis on limited, or?
Yes, we didn't. So normally, if you've come and seen us test before, you'll come in and there's going to be
I've been to the circus before.
Oh yeah. There's going to be people playing standard or whatever the constructed format is in paper. There's going to be some people playing on Magic Online. But you'll see 2 or 3 people at least firing drafts.
Minimum.
Yeah.
Sometimes you guys will have a screen where multiple people will be giving input to one person who's drafting, just throwing out opinions and stuff.
This time, I don't think I saw anyone do a draft. We did 2 drafts, and that was when we were driving from DC to Richmond in a van that had Wi-Fi.
Really?
Yeah. So we did 2 drafts at that point, but for the most part, people are just not drafting at all because everyone's done tons of drafts so far.
Okay.
And we still talk about limited, and we've still tried to settle on some things that are interesting, and our edges here is just going to be that Dominaria is hard to play as part of it. The games are complicated.
Yes.
And that I don't think that the public at large has settled on a draft strategy or anything like that. You're not going to find stuff there's every now and then there's some, there's formats where you have a common that going into the Pro Tour, we think this common is a 7 and the average person thinks it's a 4.
Mm-hmm. And that is often what you guys are looking for, right?
That's an
those
edge,
gaps in equity.
Because you're getting, 5th or 6th pick cards, which we think are 3rd pick cards. Not really going to happen here. People know Pegasus Courser is good. People know that Black-Green Saplings is good. That one was very easy to identify. So that wouldn't have been a secret even if the set was out a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
What I think was going to happen is we're going to figure out where all the synergy decks end up and how the synergy decks play out. So a lot of what Dominaria is about is synergy, and trying to just know how all the pieces interlock is really important. Things like how white-black or white-blue or blue-black historic play, because all 3 of those decks kind of show up.
Yep.
Things that okay, now that you have 2 Windgrace Acolytes, this Soul Salvage gets a decent amount better. Or things like Whisper, that the legend
Blood Liturgist, yeah.
Blood Liturgist, right? She's quite good. Not everyone seems to be on board with that.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I mean, I don't think that this format there's too much groundbreaking stuff here that people don't know about.
I'm curious. So when everybody comes in, I was in that room today with you guys, and I was talking to Ben Whites, who you've been testing with, and Ben had just submitted the deck he was going to play for Standard and was drafting, and I said, well, what is it like, coming in? Because I put myself in Ben's spot, and I've drafted this set a lot,
right.
I mean, for me at least, so, probably...
Which is a lot for a normal person.
50-ish? Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of drafts. And, I've got my ideas, right? Yeah. I've talked to you about it. But you know what I haven't done? Throw them against, 7 professional Magic players, or in your case, 12 or 13 other ones or whatever, and sort of start to come to a consensus. And to sort of figure out where everybody's at on these things. Is that a goal that you guys have? Does everybody kind of do their own thing, or is it we want to have a baseline?
We do that. I mean, what we're trying to identify here, I think that at this stage in the format, and this is, I think, true for a lot of our listeners too, what you're trying to identify are the marginal, the small edges.
Yep.
Things like Vidalian Arcanist, right? The 2-mana 1/3 that taps for spells only.
Mm-hmm.
This card is probably better than most people think.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that, I think that you get it late enough in drafts that people are really not valuing it very highly. And I'm not saying the card's great, but it means that people don't realize that, it just doesn't need to, you don't need to have 10 spells to make this card good. if you have a fight with fire and like 2 other spells it can cast, and then like reason like that it helps with like 4 to 5 mana spells, and then like 2 cheaper spells, it's probably pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't need to do that much. It's a 2 mana 1/3. It can already block like a Sapphire.
Yeah. Yes, and there's a lot of 2 mana 1/3s in the format. That seems to be one of the better ones.
Things like Memorial to Folly, Memorial to Genius, and Memorial to Unity, the Sultai memorials once again.
Yep.
Are all like very high picks because you end up with so many playables that getting to take one of these and essentially have an extra spell in your deck.
That's a real edge. Like, knowing that going in is a big edge.
Yeah, like I think that Memorial to Genius is better than almost all the commons, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to take it over like Eviscerate or Vicious Offering, or Sheathen Fire, right? Like the premier stuff, pretty easily take it over like Sapphire or Academy Journey Mage. These are cards that I think that knowing how to get more bang for your buck is really important.
So, do you think you're going to have to go over those baselines, or do you assume that the people coming in should already know that kind of stuff? Like that, for example, aggressive decks in this format tend to not perform well or not show up that often. Like, do you assume that everybody in the room already knows that? Or does that need to be said?
I assume that people on our team know that, but we are going to talk about it.
Okay.
And we already have.
Because I like the idea of getting it all on the table, but I'm just curious to see, like, let's say I had qualified and I flew in 3 or 4 days ago. I know what I know about the format, but I don't assume everybody does. And also, I don't necessarily assume that I'm right. Somebody might tell me something.
This is a really hard hypothetical to wrap my head around here, but
me qualifying for the Pro Tour.
It's actually kind of funny. Like, deck lists being due on a Wednesday kind of have changed the dynamic a little bit, and the part of the reason once the deck lists are due, in fact, I've already turned mine in.
This is for Constructed.
Yeah, for Constructed.
Yeah.
I haven't turned in my limited deck list because I don't know what
Do you
3
already know
bad
what you're
rares I'm going to open yet.
Yeah.
But, once they're in, it's a lot easier to then focus on limited. So that's also been kind of like, shelved. Like, I've been trying to have conversations throughout the week just to make sure that I'm on the same page, or at least understand where people are coming from. But for the most part, this is not a format like, to give you an example from the last Pro Tour, Golden Guardian, right? The 4 mana 4/4 that flips into the Golden Garrison.
Yeah, that spits out the 4/4s.
We did our limited meeting. We had that in like, the top 15 cards in the set or something.
Because it's colorless.
Yeah, colorless, really good. I got that card 5th at the Pro Tour.
5th?
5th. John Stern got the card like 7th or something. And
wow.
That's the sort of thing where like, maybe the card's not the most obvious bomb, but everyone on our team had played against it, and the people who hadn't listened to the people who had. That's not going to happen at this Pro Tour. You're not going to get a first pick card, 5th pick, especially a colorless one. No one's going to pass you Helm of the Host, right?
Right.
Helm of the Host is the exact kind of card where, like, if you opened a pack and had never seen it before, you'd read it and maybe think the tokens only last on a turn. Or you'd read it and be like, wow, 4 to cast, 5 to equip.
Yeah, I could just get blown out.
Yeah. And you might pass it because you're like, look, I don't know how good this rare is. Eviscerate, I know this card's good.
Yep. And you'd be making a grievous error.
Right. And at this Pro Tour, that's just not going to happen because
that's
I would have a hard time imagining people, sitting down to draft Dominaria at this Pro Tour and having it be their 3rd Dominaria draft. It's just,
I mean, that person isn't one you're worried about anyway.
Right. It's not even someone who's like intentionally like, look, I didn't really want to spend a ton of time preparing for this. They're going to do like 5 or 10 drafts.
Yeah, drafting's
awesome. Or they're just going to read some draft articles.
Yeah.
And that's different for this PT. I do expect a couple things. And this is the funny thing that I remember looking at it. This is after Amonkhet. It trickled into the online queues as well. People really wanted that Slitherblade deck. That was like the talk of the Pro Tour.
Oh, yeah.
All these people were like, windmill slamming their first pick Slitherblades and trying to put blue cartouches on them and all sorts, and Horn Kopeshas and all sorts of nonsense.
Yeah, all the 1-drops. I remember that.
And people started doing that on Magic Online too. Mm-hmm. There's going to be some people who are going to, their way of getting an edge. This is like, not the LR way. This is actually not, the Channelfireball way either. They're going to do some extreme things. And I think in Limited, that's actually generally a mistake to do.
Yeah. The term I've heard is like sort of half forcing or soft forcing a deck, like understanding an archetype that maybe isn't obvious, right? Like you mentioned some of the ones that are very clear to the players coming in, like the white-blue or blue-red wizards or something like that. Like that's a deck that kind of stands out.
Right.
The black-green sapperlings, that kind of thing. but maybe you find something that's a little more under the radar. And when you sit down to do your draft at the PT, you think, okay, I'm going to do that. And you think that you're going to be able to get an edge from doing that. That's kind of the practice that I've seen at the Pro Tour, is people taking these strategies. And the interesting thing to me is that they don't usually hold up. Sometimes you can get them, but like that example you use is a perfect example of it spilled over into Magic Online, and then people quickly realized that that deck wasn't real, that was not a consistent winning strategy. It was actually very bad. And by the time it was 2 weeks after the Pro Tour and you're drafting on Magic Online, you never saw that. Yeah. Nobody was ever like Slitherblade Cartouche kill you.
It does come out in the wash, right? It's the same as true, actually, for like decks, for constructed decks.
Yes.
You see a deck that like, a whole team plays the Pro Tour. God, I really hope this isn't the deck we're playing. This is the exact kind of deck. But where you look and there's like maybe someone top 8s with the deck, and people are like, wow, this deck is the new hotness. This is sweet. But then it's just nowhere on Magic Online in 2 weeks. Yeah. It's because it's not actually good.
Yeah, or a specifically tuned type of deck for a metagame that hits, but then like is easily hated out.
And I think that you're going to see some people doing that at this Pro Tour for limited. People always try to do that. They always try to like, the real edge is to draft mono red, and to put this, and this.
Yep, extreme. It's always extremes. Right, it's never just some 2-color pair that people don't like that much.
Yeah, and what I think is, this is to go back to the oft quoted Ben Stark on the show is people don't want to earn their wins; they want free wins.
Yeah,
and this format in particular does not lend itself to free wins. Like, yeah, sometimes you open with Llanowar Elves and just beat your opponent, but for the most part, the games are going to be long, the interactions are going to be many, and there's just not that many ways to mize wins in this format because the aggro decks tend not to be good, and there's not that many like unbeatable combos.
Yeah, this format has kept my attention for those exact reasons, I think. Like, I've still been drafting it, and like there was a travel conflict with the GP and stuff, but they came out with the Uncommons Cube on Magic Online.
Oh yeah.
I didn't draft it.
Yeah.
Like, I meant to. I was going, like, I thought, okay, I'll do that. But I had like a couple of drafts going in Dominaria. I did those. I just re-upped the queue because I'm excited. I want to keep drafting that format. And then all of a sudden I had to fly and now it's gone. I never miss a cube format unless it's the legendary one.
This Dominaria format does have legs.
Yeah, it really does.
I think it is quite interesting. I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on. And I think that it's less about trying to draft like, I'm trying to say, like, there are synergy decks, but all the decks have good cards, and you have these, like, smaller synergy packages. Yeah. So I think it's worth going through some of the decks that...
that you guys like?
Yeah, that we like and are not targeting exactly, but are, like, open to drafting. I think Green-Black Saplings is everyone's number one.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that you guys have it as Green-Black little X?
Yeah, there's often a splash.
Often a blue, like a Tetiova in there.
Yeah, one of the cards, that I always keep track of the cards we most underrate, and that Grow from the Ashes is I think, my pick for the set.
Great card.
It's a great card.
Yeah.
We thought it was crap. We were
really
wrong.
Good. Yeah.
And what this deck is trying to do is, again, make a bunch of Saprolings, but it's got a lot of different things. There's a lot of different interchangeable pieces here. And, sticking with the theme of, like, you don't have to have an all-in deck. This is part of the reason people didn't like Ixalan, and part of the reason that this format is a lot sweeter is you can have, like, 4 cards that make Saprolings, 2 ways to take advantage of it, and the rest be just, like, a high-quality black and green deck.
You mentioned the little mini synergies, right? Like, you have your Thallid Omnivore or your Soothsayer, right? But it's not a Thallid's deck necessarily.
No.
Like, you don't have to have a Spore Crown Thallid to make that deck work.
Right. So black-green, I think, is the number one, just because it's got a lot of good, flexible, powerful pieces. It's got one of the more underrated cards in Thallid Omnivore. Just got good removal. It has all its bases covered. Once you move past that, I think it gets a lot dicier because you're now talking more about good stuff decks. Like Blue-Red Wizards is very good. I think if you get the signal, if you get a 4th pick, Adeliz the Cinder Wind, and you're just like, oh yeah, this is open, we're doing it. Yeah. This deck is great. It's one of the better decks. But red is so bad that it's kind of hard to get into that. So I could certainly see myself drafting this deck, but I don't really want to start there.
I mean, how willing are you to pick like a card like Adeliz first?
I would prefer to take
Eviscerate over it, right?
Yeah, a monocolored card like Eviscerate over Adeliz, but her ceiling is really high.
Yeah, I mean that card is super, super powerful, and that's a really good deck when it goes when it comes together.
I like all the blue-based decks, and this might, be like, again, it's not like I always just force divination. I think that blue-red is good, blue-black is good, blue-white is good, and blue-green is good. In fact, some of my favorite decks are these like blue-green. Instead of Saprolings, you're just playing good ramp cards and just high-quality cards in general.
Yeah, Elfheim Druid, Llanowar Elves,
and Divination, Cloud Reader Sphinx, Blink of an Eye.
I think that deck's really good, too. I also often splash in that deck, too, by the way. Like, I get an Eviscerate in there or something like that.
Yeah, that is part of the reason that I like green and blue. They both lend themselves pretty nicely to splashes. Blue leans a little harder on Skittering Surveyor, but, Divination, Blink of an Eye, and Sphinx all help you splash.
Yep, they do. They honestly do. I mean, we make a joke all the time about, divination counts as fixing, right? But it kind of does.
Right. If you see more cards over the course of the game, you're going to draw your splash cards and your splash, fixing.
That's
or your colors, rather.
Right.
I'm basically in for any of the Sultai combinations. Kind of mentioned that earlier.
Yep.
Blue, black, green, or black, green, blue. Just some combination of those. Red and white I like as support colors. Like, Fight with Fire is great. Blessed Light is great. These, I don't mind these cards at all.
Yeah.
But I really don't want to, I would rather not start with Serra Angel. I would just hope that I could do better than that.
Yep, definitely. And then not because Serra Angel's a bad card, but because of the support.
Yeah, I just think that, the white-based aggressive deck does not look very good to me. Mm-hmm. And my experiences with it just haven't been great. I think that if you have enough equipment, it can be good. Jousting Lance is very good.
Jousting Lance is good. The short sword's
Short sword's playable,
fine.
And Pegasus Courser is quite good.
Fine. Yeah.
But here's where you don't want to be in this format. You don't want to be casting 2-mana 3/1s or 2-mana 2/2s, even the ones with lifelink, and just be assuming that your opponent's going to cooperate with this plan. That they're not going to defend themselves. There's just too many ways to get free defenders and free material and draw out the game and game life.
And that's the thing, I think, is that it's when it turns the corner back to the other person, because there's a lot of 1/3s in this format. They'll play them. You attack them, that you say run amok or whatever, run over it, get it off the battlefield. And normally that's a favorable transaction, right? You think, okay, I got in some extra damage, I killed a blocker, I'm going to be able to attack next turn, and it was even somewhat mana efficient. But what I find is that every single color, basically, even red has Gitu Chronicler, right? They have ways to later recoup any card advantage, and they're not even losing card advantage there. That's a 1-for-1, right? You're run amok for their 1/3, but, they cast a Divination. They're up a card. You're like, okay, well, I'm going to fall behind a little bit here. And kicker means that every deck has a good late game. Where a lot of times, if you're trying to be the aggressor, you can get them dead before their late game matters, or some of their cards in the late game suck, right? Their 2-drop doesn't all of a sudden become a 5/5, later on, like a Kavu or whatever. And same thing with some of the other kicker creatures, but even anything with kicker basically makes it so that all of these decks can go over the top of you in the late game. So you have to be able to get them dead and get them dead quickly, and that's just hard. It's just hard to do. Plus the removal in this set's good. Don't try to play black-green, right? With an aggressive deck. They're going to kill your first thing with a fungal infection. Then they're going to play a sap herd.
Fungal infection pumps the brakes on a lot of aggro decks.
And then they're going to play Yavimaya sap herd and be like, go. And you're sitting there staring at your Knight of New Benalia. What are you doing with that, right? Even if you use a combat trick to get it over, it doesn't work. That's why the strategies that I've liked best for white are blue-white, because you can take advantage of Courser and Flyers.
Historic and or fly, flying like skies, because Relic Seeker and then the Pegasus Courser both, and equipment to some degree, mean that you can just dodge a lot of the cards that would normally clog up the board.
And then the other one that I've had success with that has a heavier white component, although still probably isn't base white, is black-white. And the reason that I think that works for me is because that has the highest quality removal pair in the whole set. And I never have felt like any of my white-black decks were exceptional. They've just had all the pieces needed to win games of limited with minimal synergy. I mean, I'm not even putting trappers or anything in those decks. It's just as many uncommons and rares in those colors as I can get, filled in with as much removal as I can jam in.
Yeah, and those
that
decks
can
are
get
fine.
the job done, right? This isn't something that I strive for, but I have won trophies with those decks multiple times. So I know, sick brags, right? I won a trophy.
Another thing to watch out for is sideboarding. I think one of the ways to get an edge in this format is sideboarding, because you end up with so many playables that not only just the like, look, you're going to bring in, an extra Invoke the Divine or Broken Bond because you played against a bunch of equipment or whatever, but figuring out like if you have ways to try and change up your deck's game plan, like I've had like blue-red control decks that side in a couple Warcry Phoenix, and like you have one or two of those on your board. You just picked them up really late in the draft, and like maybe another aggressive card you wouldn't have played, and it just kind of shifts how your deck plays out, really depending on what your opponent does.
We saw that as a GP, by the way. Now this is team sealed, so it's different, but we saw like Shahar, like people, bringing in these sort of like, I just need to get you dead, like it's high risk, high reward type stuff. But like those cards he brought in against you were all out of the sideboard.
Oh yeah.
He brought in 4 sideboard cards and he drew all 4 of them.
Yeah, he did a good job there because he saw my game 1. This is when I had a Mirari Conjecture deck, kind of going off, going big and just killing all his stuff. And so he brought in a bunch of Snappers and Arcane Flights.
Yep.
And yeah, it worked. I mean, he killed me with Arcane Flight in game 3.
Yeah. So that's one thing that you can use out for. One other question before we move on to our listener questions. Do you feel like having this gap in time is better or worse for the pros? Because you get more time to grind more drafts.
Much worse.
It's worse, right?
Yeah, it's almost strictly worse.
Yeah, because you're losing a little bit of your group.
Part of the advantage of having a group of people, and not just pros have groups. Everyone has testing teams.
A highly organized group of efficient workers.
I haven't tried that yet, but
I haven't seen it yet either.
Is that when you have 8 or 10 or 12 people working and then sharing ideas, like they're much more efficient than one person. So I'm not arguing about the fairness of it. I'm not saying this is no way saying like, they should cater to this group or do things that advantage this other group. I'm just saying, like, I believe our win percentage is going to be lower because we're not getting past Helm of the Hosts anymore, right? We're not getting to leverage the fact that we have people who are good at breaking formats quickly. And I certainly don't mind getting an advantage where I can. Magic's a hard game.
Sure.
You need as much as you can get. But I prefer for both limited and constructed smaller gaps. I think it's just more interesting to watch, too.
Yeah, I do, too, from a commentary perspective as well. Should we answer some questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. First one comes from Jeff, who says, I recently started playing Magic Online, and I suck at it. He says, I'm decent in person, not great, not even very good, but decent, and I'm absolutely abysmal online. And I mean, even accounting for the fact that I'm playing an on average higher level player than I do at my local game store, I'm constantly running out of clock. He says, I'm quite fast in paper, screwing up mana payments. And the other day, I even made a basic island hexproof when I misclicked trying to buff my creature. Do you have recommendations on how to improve at the medium, meaning Magic Online? I'm genuinely rarely frustrated at losing a game of Magic because I was outplayed or even due to bad luck with the cards. But I'm often increasingly frustrated at losing to the interface. I'd prefer to believe that I can shift my perception rather than blame everything on Magic Online because that stance, while fairly popular, isn't something I can improve on. Good question, Jeff. I
mean, the short answer is practice. You will get used to it. Humans are adaptable. The slightly more useful answer, perhaps, is try to familiarize yourself with like shortcuts. Don't have every stop set. Just use the ones that are useful to you. I tend to have my own beginning of combat, both my main phases, and I think that's it for my turn.
Yeah, I have very similar.
Declare attackers and declare blockers, I guess. Yeah,
I have
the three combat steps.
The main combat steps, but not the damage.
No, not damage or into combat.
I don't think I have into combat. Yeah, I have actually what I would consider the minimum.
I think on the opponent's turn, I just have, again, the 3 combat steps and their end of turn. You don't need to stop on their main phase.
No.
You can also set a stop if you need to do that. So that'll help.
Yeah.
Get used to the cadence of pressing the OK key or whatever.
Yeah, one of the things that I've mentioned on the show before, but I'll mention it again, is that, Magic Online, for all of its interface flaws, and admitting also that it's just a complicated game to try to do, it does let you remap keys on your keyboard. And I do that. Just 3 of them. I remap A, S, and D, and that lets me hold my hand in a comfortable position where I don't have to look down at the function keys often or the top row. And I know those 3 keys, what they do, and I have them set so that S is okay. So that's just okay. And A is it's the F3, like it's don't stop auto yielding. And D is F6. So that's go. And, I find that like that helps me be much quicker. Like it's just a much more efficient way to keep your hand still at all times. I don't have to lift my hand off the keyboard when I'm playing. Like, it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're pressing these keys as many times as we do, I mean, when I had it on the F keys, I'd have to glance down occasionally, to make sure I don't hit the wrong one or whatever. And like now, I never look down at the keyboard. I just have those 3 keys set up. And then I do the same thing that you did, Luis, which is basically minimal stops, and I set the extra stops when I need them but don't have them on by default. Yeah, almost never.
That should all help.
Yeah, that's practical advice, but I think your first thing was actually the real deal, which is you just have to keep doing it. It can be frustrating.
I do think it's worth it, by the way.
I do too.
As much as people bag on Magic Online, it's really useful and it's fun. You get to play a lot of Magic.
Yeah, so stick with it, Jeff. You will get it, and try our shortcuts. They do help smooth it over a little bit. Next one comes from Ryan, who says, in Limited, there are cards that create immediate value and those that create value over time. The magnitude of the value can vary. An example of 2 very strong versions of each are Ravenous Chupacabra and Aerial Knight of Windgrace. So, Chupacabra right now and Aerial slow, but does take over the game eventually. If you had to choose between these 2 cards in a vacuum of a, quote, slower format, which one would you want in your deck? Follow-up question, is there any set of circumstances in which the answer to the previous question is not Ravenous Chupacabra?
I'm having a hard time imagining it, just because I think maybe a better example, because this one it's Chupacabra, it's not close, and there's not really many limited formats.
Yeah, but what about does the gold nature of a card like Aerial matter to you there? Like, what if Aerial was one color?
No, I was thinking, like, what if we used Helm of the Host instead of Aerial?
Yeah, great. Take that completely off the table.
Like, I would still choose Chupacabra in this format.
I would too.
I don't think we're still slow enough for Helm of the Host.
You know what? The reason for me that comes to my mind when you say that, because I agree 100%, is win cons are a dime a dozen. Like, yeah, there's better versions, and Helm of the Host is a really good one because it can warp the game. Sometimes you play it on turn 4, and on turn 5, your opponent's like, I can't even tap out.
You know what's the cards you can't get enough of, though? The cards that help turn a game around and you're behind.
That's right. Dang right. And, removal and cards that are good when you're behind they are the most premium. Like, you know what I can win a game with? Primordial Worm. Right? That card's a stinker. It's not even very good, but that'll win the game. Oh, yeah. Sure.
There are some blood on Primordial Worm's hands.
Yeah.
I guess it doesn't have hands that are, mandibles.
Yeah. Right. And then, or another example would be like a good common, like a Cloud Reader Sphinx. You know what? If I've wiped my opponent's board and managed to survive, I'll beat you down with that. It might take 2 or 3 extra turns over like a big bomb-y win con like Aerial or something like that. Or Helm of the Host, but it'll get the job done. But you draw Helm of the Host when you're behind, you lose. If you go for a Helm of the Host at an inopportune time when your opponent blows you out, your win percentage dips significantly. You draw a Ravenous Chupacabra and there's just no board state where it's not good. It just doesn't exist. So, yeah. So there you go, Ryan. So the answer to your follow-up question is probably no. I just can't imagine, Next one comes from William, who says, what do you think of different strategies meant to reduce the amount of information you give your opponent? Stuff like shuffling your sideboard into your deck and then taking out 15 cards to disguise how many you brought in. Or in our case for Limited, maybe just putting a couple in and then just taking them out is something I see people do a lot. In fact, Paulo said he does that. Shuffling a pack before passing it in a physical draft to make it harder for your opponent to tell what you might have been looking at. Trying to suppress potential reactions to good or bad top deck, not going, hoo, we did it. Another one, this is super subtle, but how you draw your card off the top of the library. Most people draw the same way, but when they really need something, they'll put a lot more emphasis on it, trying to not let yourself do that. He says, is there an edge to be had, or is that just a waste of time and mental energy?
So my first inclination is worrying about most of the stuff is generally not where you want to spend a lot of time, but there's a couple things in here that are useful. One is that I believe sideboarding a card or 2 in Limited, you should basically always do it. And actually changing your deck, but looking like you did. Mm-hmm. And Paulo had the best argument for it, which is if you don't do that, they'll know that you won't have any very specific sideboard cards in your deck. Like, they know, like, in most formats, you won't have, like, a naturalized disenchant type of effect or a fog kind of effect.
Plummet.
Right, plummet. So you might as well not give them that information for free.
Right.
You should generally not be guffawing or, about your top decks regardless of what the game is. That's just, I think pretty standard. And I think in general, like, I wouldn't worry too much about this kind of thing. But I do think that for limited, especially sideboarding, just 1 or 2 cards is good.
Yeah, the way I would look at it is,
like your opponent's just going to know you don't have a negate in your deck if you never do this.
If you never bring it in. And so that seems to be that the upside's quite high and the downside's quite low. It only takes an extra minute. But another one would be, like you were talking about, like, in general, you shouldn't be doing that. Well, the cost of you taking some time to train yourself to not react to every top deck is actually pretty low. Like, that's something you can train yourself pretty quickly. It's just mainly an awareness thing. So you should do that, right? That's just, there's no downside to that almost at all. It's not like you're going to, spend weeks and hours.
when your boss says something weird, you don't just be like, you just kind of roll with it, right? Like, that's just
you can do that here
normal
too.
human interactions.
Yes.
Like,
Drew says, I have a game design opinion question. What do you think of cards like Naru Meha, which can copy a spell when it enters a battlefield? It seems straightforward, but it utilizes the stack in a way which can be confusing to newer players and is harder to navigate on Magic Online. Does the benefit of making a card with this ability outweigh those detriments?
Yes is the short answer. I think because it's a cool effect. Mm-hmm. It does some cool stuff. I do think you want to be very careful about it, because what you says is just 100% true. Naru Meha has a mythic rare. Yeah. You get a lot of latitude at mythic rare. Mm-hmm. This would be a really inappropriate uncommon. Certainly not even close to a common, but even at uncommon, I would have problems with it.
Or even that effect, like let alone the flash and the plus one. But,
I'm not even talking about that stuff. Just the straight up, like, when this enters the battlefield, copy a spell.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, because on Magic Online, it requires you to hold priority. In physical, it requires you to hold priority. And putting on a mythic rare works out just fine. One cool piece of technology you can also do is, like, copy the last spell played this turn. So you could just make, like...
or the next spell.
Or the next spell.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you really wanted to next spell is actually even better. So if you really wanted to make an uncommon version of this effect, which I, again, wouldn't recommend, but even like a normal rare version, like, 2 red, like 2/2, copy the next spell, play this turn. That's a cool design.
That's a cool design too. Yeah, this one gives you a little bit more play, right? Because you can
I think
interact
this one
with
really
the stack
fits
as
with the wizard, whole wizard theme.
Yeah,
but at a low rarity, I think would be pretty unpleasant, because I guarantee you, even at Mythic Rare, there are hundreds of people who have cast their Wizard's Lightning with the intention of copying with the Naru Meha, and it just resolved. And they're like, what the hell?
Yes.
Because you have to, like, hold down control to do this, you know?
But I like it. But the key here is that this is Mythic Rare, and that matters for how.
Yeah, rarity is one of your most important and powerful tools when that you get to leverage when you're designing cards.
All right, Kyle says, hey guys, I'm in a sealed league at my work that's been running since Shadows over Innistrad. You buy 6 packs at the start, and you can buy a new pack once a week to add to your pool. The season lasts the entire duration of the set's lifespan, and we usually have some pretty powerful decks by the end. Since Dominaria launched, I've been getting totally destroyed. It's been frustrating, and I've chalked it up to me just not getting this set. I've tried various strategies and color combinations, and nothing seems to work. Everyone else just seems to play things I can never hope to answer. I finally sat down with one of our best veteran players to look at my pool, and his conclusion was, your pool's just awful. Okay, so my question is, now what? Do I just keep taking beatings in the name of practice? Is the set's lifespan long enough that there's a good chance that all of our pools will level out eventually? Am I wasting money every week if I keep buying into this? Lastly, I've never had cards this dysfunctional before. Is my pool really that bad, or is Dominaria just an unforgiving format for sealed? Thanks a lot. I love what you all do.
Part of this is hard to answer because we don't really know what your pool is. Yeah. But in general, your pool's going to level out. The more packs you open, the more likely it is that you're going to have similar power levels just because the variance is lower.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're probably on the bottom end of that already.
Yeah.
And in general, I think you can do creative things with your pool. Like, especially since, this is a closed ecosystem. You know what the other decks are to some degree.
Yes.
There's no shame in main decking some negate effects or playing some disenchants if that's what will be effective against the other people who you're facing.
Yeah, what I would do is I have 2 thoughts on this. The first one is you should absolutely keep playing. Like, I know it's not that fun to lose, but you have a lot to learn here, especially if your expectations are already set when you walk in, that it's not like, oh, I'm just going to, I'm not going to win everything. That's okay. You still can learn a lot. And the other thing I would do is I would experiment. I would say, okay, I've lost a bunch in this sealed league. I'm probably not going to win a lot going forward. So you know what I'm going to do instead? I'm going to try some stuff. So what I would try is what you said. I would try to metagame. I would say, all right, well, everybody's playing bombs and they're really expensive. I'm going to start running counter spells like way more frequently than I would. Or everybody's deck is slow. I'm going to try to go under them. You've probably got a whole bunch of cards to choose from. Try putting in every aggressive, play your sparring constructs with all the equipment you can get and, every cheap creature and try to go underneath. And it might not work. That's okay. Like if you had the obvious path, you would have already been playing that. This is meant to be experimental. So take this opportunity, Kyle, and, you have a little bit of pressure off of you if look, I'm not doing well in the league. I'm probably not going to do well. And you can use that to your advantage to try stuff that you wouldn't want to do if you had, let's say, a really good record and you were in the running for some prizes. You're like, well, I want to try this, but I'm not willing to risk this league. Well, you got nothing to lose now, so run it up. Avium says, hey, Marshall and Luis, I feel like every time I open a bomb rare, I hardly ever draw it, if at all. For example, in the Dominaria pre-release, I opened Lyra Dawnbringer and didn't draw her until round 5. You often talk on the show about how these cards would finish out a game for you, but I have a hard time relating to this. It feels to me like I should focus more on commons and uncommons and have these bombs as a nice occasional occurrence rather than relying on them to come up and finish the game, putting builder rounds even further out of scope for me. Would appreciate your thoughts and advice on this. Thanks, Avium. Oh, we got to sit you down, buddy. We need to have a little chat with Avium here because this is a mentality that can creep in.
This is what we would call confirmation bias.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that Avium is lying. Definitely not. No. Definitely don't take that away. But what you are doing and what your mind is tricking you, and we've all suffered from this. When you opened that Lyra and you didn't see it till round 5, that happened, right? That was true. No doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
But you only remember it because it's Lyra. There's plenty of other cards you drew more than average, or plenty of other bombs you drew and just didn't think about because you were drawing them.
Because you're too busy winning the game.
Right. And there is no way that, any one person is like unluckier going in than anyone else.
That's right.
You can look back and say that. Like, you can look back and say that, for example, I am very unlucky. You can look back
and have it be a fact.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
You can look back at, like the last 2 pools I opened at the Grand Prix were really bad.
Yeah.
And I would re-rolled both pools. That doesn't mean I believe, and in no way, shape do I, that the next pool I open is going to be below average. Like, I know it will be because I'm unlucky, but it really won't be. Like, It could be or it could not be, but the odds are the same. The next time, you open Lyra, you might draw it, every single game of the draft. And that can happen too. That's part of the range of experiences.
It's just that your mind blocks that part out because that's what you were hoping for / expecting anyway.
Well, right? And you have this narrative in your head now. Like once you have the narrative in your head that I don't draw bombs, every time you have a draft where you first pick Icy Manipulator and don't draw it, or you draw it only 2 of your 7 games, it reinforces that narrative. You're like, look, I just didn't draw the Icy.
Yes.
Then the next draft, you open a Siege Gang Commander and you play it more than average. Your brain thinks, I played this the average amount of times. This doesn't disprove my theory, or you just don't even account for that. You're just like, okay, whatever. I drew it this time, but I know next time I won't, or I didn't last time.
And that's what stands out to me, Avian, from your message.
Just the way this is worded.
Yeah, like you knew the exact round, that you drew this. Also, there's a lot of for me.
Yeah.
Right? As if you were the exception. You are not. And that is a tough lesson to learn. But over the course of the long term, we all reach that middle ground at some point. Now, over the course of a short term, anything goes. Like you not drawing Lyra till turn 5. That happens.
You might never open Lyra again. She's a mythic rare. Yeah. You're not going to get past her. And the one time you opened her, you drew her less than average. And that sucks. You want to draw her. You want to draw her more than average.
Yes, and there's no shame in recognizing it from a sense of I'm disappointed that this happened. That's fine. We all feel that, but don't let that creep into this narrative or this mentality that your brain will help feed you that says I'm unluckier than other people. You are as lucky as everyone else. It's just on any given stretch you can get unlucky. So Avium, I would implore you to try to jettison this. These are things you should not be paying close attention to. This, to me, is akin to the I never win a die roll, right?
Yes, the people who keep track, like, this is round 14, and I'm, 9-5 in die rolls.
Right.
And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
That's not really something you want to waste mental energy on. And
yeah.
where it becomes harmful is when you start thinking, I never draw my bombs, so I won't build around them.
Yes.
I'm not going to draft to maximize, my Siege Gang commander by taking a Soul Salvage. I just know I'm not going to draw it. And it's like, no, you don't know that.
Right. You really don't. And you should prioritize these every bit as much as you would have. And I don't want you to let go, Avium, as well, of the idea of build-arounds, because while it's not every format where build-arounds are either viable or available, they are something that's important to the limited ecosystem, and you can't write them off. You can't just say, I just don't do build-arounds because I never draw them. That is not a viable way to approach this. So try to break that confirmation bias chain, Avium, and I know it can be hard to do. But
we're wired this way.
Yes.
This is human nature. There's no shame in falling for this because this is just how we are wired. But yeah, it's a tough one to escape.
Yeah. Okay, a couple more questions here. This one comes from Blaine, who says, hey guys, love the show and has helped my game significantly. Glad to hear it, Blaine. I'm headed to my first GP ever this year, and I figured what better way to start my GP career than Vegas, baby.
Oh, yeah.
I've been doing pretty well with PPTQs, and I want to do well at this GP, but I also don't want to let making it to day 2 cloud my head. How should I balance confidence in my game with realistic expectations? What was your first GP like? Also, which color sleeves should I use if I want to win? Thanks, and I hope to see you at Vegas. We'll both be there, you and I.
Oh, yes.
The sleeves, obviously you should be using limited resources or Channelfireball sleeves. I'll let you choose between the two, Blaine. But I'm really glad to hear this question from Blaine because it shows that Blaine is thinking the right way. Saying, look, I'm acknowledging that I really want to make day 2 at my first GP, but I don't want to let that cloud my brain. So why don't we answer that part first, and then we'll talk about our first GPs as well.
So the boring but correct answer is you need to play, or you should rather, play all your matches as if they were the same. Because if your goal is to maximize your win percentage, then it doesn't matter whether you're playing for day 2, whether you're playing for top 8, whether you're playing to not go 0-5. You're supposed to just play all the matches the same. The stakes of the match shouldn't change your decision making within the match.
No, and that is a tough lesson to learn. It's one that I learned from poker, and that is that you cannot simply walk into an event like this and have an expectation of a certain result. You are simply trying to apply your best skill repeatedly, and over the course of the long term, you'll get the results you want.
For sure. And it's hard, and to get there, it's hard to not feel it when, let's say Blaine, finds himself at like 5-2 playing for day 2 of Grand Prix Las Vegas. There's no way they're not going to feel it.
Yes.
They are.
Yes.
Like that's just how it is. But that doesn't mean that you should not strive for that. And, that can be tough. And one of the things, I know he doesn't listen to the podcast, so I don't mind saying it, is one of the things I actually always really admired about Paul Cheon, he now works for Wizards, but he's formerly a pro player. We don't talk about him much on the show for good reason.
Never heard of him. Yeah.
Paul's actually my best friend also. When we used to play test and practice for Pro Tours, we started playing together. He played every game like it was the most important game of his Magic career. And I thought that was like an incredible quality to have. He just had this like fighting instinct of like...
He's very competitive.
Yeah, right. Like we could be playing a cube draft at 2 a.m, or play testing for, a Grand Prix, or we could be playing in a Grand Prix or in the Pro Tour, all of which has happened.
Yeah.
And he played with his intention of winning and crushing. And he didn't let it faze him what we were playing for or not playing for. And both those things are important because when you're practicing for Vegas or whatever tournament is important to you, there's a really easy temptation to just be kind of loose when you're just practicing. You're just playing just playing a draft on Magic Online. You're playing against one of your friends at the office league. And if you want to, good practice it was what you're striving for, right? Like perfect practice it makes perfect play. If you can maintain that mindset while you're playing for low stakes or high stakes, you're going to be in a really good spot. So kind of a long-winded way of saying just kind of trying to focus on the match and don't worry about the externalities.
But that's the key is what are your expectations? They should not be linked to outcomes within the tournament. They should be, my expectations are that I'm going to sit down every match and I'm going to do the best that I know how to do. And I'm going to keep my focus and I'm going to take care of my body. I'm going to do the things necessary to try to do well.
The best attitude to have is I'm going to play my best this tournament.
Yes.
And if that means that I make day 2 because I open a good pool and my opponents are the ones mulling to 5 and I'm not, or I top deck Fight with Fire on the last turn, awesome.
Yeah.
But it also means if you go 3-3 and don't make day 2, but you look back and you're like, I gave myself the best chance to win. I played the best of my abilities. Right. That's not an unsuccessful tournament.
Yeah. I don't think people understand how hard it is to do well at these either. Like, I think if you took like a good pro player and said, okay, what's your match win percentage at a GP on average for your career, like over a big sample, and they achieve that match win percentage, they wouldn't top 8.
No.
Right? You're not expected to,
No, the best GP players have like low 70, high 60 match win percentage. That is not even close to enough to top 8. You have to put 13-2.
Yeah. So there you go. First GP, my first one was GP Portland. I did not day 2.
My first GP was GP Anaheim in 2003. This was it. So the format was extended, kind of think modern, right? Not the oldest cards, but a big card pool. And it was in a weird spot where they had banned a bunch of cards, but those cards were still legal for that tournament because they had a 1-month window. And I had all those cards. It was this like artifact deck that was busted. But I sold the deck at the GP because this was the last tournament they were going to be legal for. So their value was going to go down after the GP. And I wanted to get my money's worth. So I sold the busted deck. This is the old like Tinker Metalworker Goblin Welder deck.
I love that deck.
And I played this like rancid black-green rock deck.
That was cheap?
That was cheap and I could borrow the cards for. Look, these were the things that drove my decision-making at the time.
I mean, you used to sell and trade cards and stuff, right?
And at this point, this was literally my first GP. I was in college. I had no expectations. I ended up making day 2 and actually finished 20th in the Grand Prix.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I have some good stories from that GP. I'll give you one, which is good. The best deck was this artifact deck. So I was playing this deck that had a bunch of, 2 and a green 2/2s when it comes into play, destroy an artifact. We had 6 of these because there's 2 different versions legal in the format, Uktabi Orangutan and Viridian Shaman. Had a bunch of Vampiric Tutors. That card's busted, 1 black, search for any card, put it on top of your deck.
Yeah, especially in those toolbox decks.
Right. But all my cards were crap to go get. It was just a black-green control deck. But my opponent mind-slavered me. They took control of my turn. And my way of countering this that happened in the tournament, they mind-slavered me, so I Vampiric Tutored.
Something bad?
For Molder Slug. This is a 5-mana 4/6.
I don't like that card. You beat the crap out of me on that cruise with that card.
That's not a good card. It's a 5-mana 4/6, and it says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, they sacrifice an artifact. I had a very hateful deck. So all they could do on my turn was I vamped, so that was the top card, so that's my top deck. I had a bunch of lands and I had a Molder Slug, and if they played it, it would start eating the artifacts, so all they had to do was pass the turn. It was not the most devastating mind-flavored turn in the world.
Just a time walk?
Yeah.
Very nice. Well played, Luis. And great. Geez, 20th is a good finish. One more question here. This one comes from Fingal, who says, how long into the format do you start experimenting with stuff? Would you jam a funky Lich's Mastery deck right out of the gates, for example, or do you prefer to get a couple of, quote, safe drafts in to get a feel for the format? And what I do is actually, I've talked about it on the show before, but I have like kind of a 2-pronged approach to this. If I think that a strategy has real potential, I will experiment. I am fine going for it early in a draft, especially on an archetype, less so than like a specific card.
Well, especially if it's high rarity too.
Yes. Like I want to take the chance to try to get that. I might not open that card again, right? So I will absolutely take those risks. If I'm skeptical or just probably think that the card's not very good, like Lich's Mastery is a good example, right? Like we've kind of found that there is a deck.
There are circumstances where you play this card.
Thing. Yeah. But you know what? It isn't just good. No. Right? It is not just a good card. And my strategy, the other prong of my strategy is I make people beat me with it. right? When I lose 2 drafts to Lich's Mastery, I'm like, all right, I get it. You know, I'm on board now. But I feel like I can kind of crowdsource the testing here and not spew off my own drafts if I let other people beat me with it. And once I start losing to it, then I'm like, okay, fine, I get it, and I'm going to go for it. But I don't think it's a situation where I need to be the one to discover every single thing. I'll know if I'm, losing to something.
So yeah, high rarity cards I will frequently take early, pretty aggressively, because again, you don't know when you're going to open that card again if you're going to, and especially since a lot of my preparation is geared towards the Pro Tour, the nightmare scenario is opening a rare at the Pro Tour and not knowing how good it is.
Oh yeah.
Because then it's like, wow, do I pass this like potentially busted card, or do I take a safe common? And you don't want to be the person who's like, telling people about your draft afterwards, and like, you passed Lich's Mastery?
Right.
So I am pretty aggressive about taking rares. I do think, I can't speak to the sentiment though. Like I would say usually about 20 drafts in is when I start getting a little off the rails.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I'm definitely willing to go deep later. Yeah.
I'm going to be playing more Navigator's Compasses near the latter end of the format than the former.
Don't send me those screenshots. I got to keep respect for you, man. All right, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks so much for everybody for the questions off of Patreon. We appreciate you sending those in. And there's a bunch more as well for questions of the week. I'll be refreshing the thread as I do at some point down the line. I'll remind you that this show is brought to you by channelfireball.com, and that you can, of course, sell your cards back to CFB. This is a really great way to sort of keep that circle of life going for Magic, which is ultimately a pretty darn expensive hobby. It's worth it, but that doesn't mean that you just get money out of nowhere. And one way you can help combat those costs is by taking the cards you're not using and selling them back to Channel Fireball, because if you trade them in for store credit, they're going to give you a 30% bonus on that money. And that is just a great way to get a new box of cards or to trade in the rares you don't need for the ones that you do. Definitely recommend taking advantage of that offer. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can also find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled few thousand miles apart show next week. We'll see you then.
So I want to go on record, because this is before the Pro Tour, that not only is there a very classic mistake players make, I believe I might be making it for this tournament. So this, I will let myself be a precautionary tale.
This is great.
One of the things that it happens more in constructed than limited, but it definitely applies to both, is conflating hard to play against with hard to play with.
Okay.
And thinking that the latter is an advantage.
Okay, so how do you mean? Yeah.
So our constructed deck is a little loose, and
I saw it.
It is quite hard to play.
Okay.
That is not an upside. It's actually a downside. In fact, it's just a strict downside. Like, one of the reasons that people often defend their deck choices with is like, well, this deck's hard to play. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't mean that's a good thing.
Right.
It can be very easy to think like, you work really hard and the deck gives you wins. It's hard to play, but it's good reward.
Oh, I see.
But it's just strictly worse to have your deck be hard to play. Now, having your deck hard to play against is a completely different animal. It does so happen that I believe our deck is hard to play against as well. And that part is good, because when you, like, one of the decks I don't believe is particularly hard to play, but is hard to play against right now is Blue-White Control. You just play your best spell every turn, and that usually does the trick. But when your opponent has a bunch of mana untapped and you have to play around Settle the Wreckage, which exiles all attacking creatures, Seal Away or Cast Out, which exile just one, or a Torrential Gearhulk, or a Blink of an Eye, like, that's really hard.
And counter spells of various sorts.
Right, a bunch of counter spells. When they have 6 mana untapped and you have 3 creatures in play, you're really stuck between decisions. There's a lot of different decisions. And that's upside. That's good for Blue-White. It's hard to play against. On the other hand, you've got, again, I don't want to exactly reveal what we're playing, because, I'm not sure on the timing of the show, but, I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to make fun of me later. This deck's hard to play, and it's got a lot of micro decisions, and if you get them wrong, you'll lose, but it doesn't mean your opponent is exposed to that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like...
That is interesting.
It's kind of like a combo deck, right? It's not hard to play against most combo decks.
You usually just sit there and watch.
Right. You usually just sit there, and if your opponent does things correctly and kills you, then you're dead. And if they don't, then they lose. And if you have a hand disruption spell, you've already cast it. If you have a counter spell, sometimes it's tricky to figure out what to counter, and that can be hard. If you have a card like Thalia that makes all cards cost 1 more, you will have played it. Not hard to play against. Really hard to play with combo decks.
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of their win percentage that's baked in is you have to play all these things correctly, and that's why you notice like Storm combo decks, right, in Modern or Legacy, or tend not to be played except by very experienced players, because you have to be good. Because let's say the deck has a 65% win percentage when piloted perfectly. Well, you better be on the high side of that to really get it done. Whereas something like Mono Red, pretty easy to play under most circumstances, and maybe it's, people always say it's harder to play than it is. Whatever. Not even getting into that argument.
Yeah.
If there's a deck that's like, you point and click, no decisions, that's very easy. If it was hard to play against, that would be great. It's still better to play a deck that's easy to play. And I fear that we may have locked ourselves into a deck that's got a lot going on.
So all of a sudden, the best case scenario now is that you crush with it tomorrow, and everybody says that you broke it, and we have this recorded.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to go on record and say that even if our win percentage is high, and we do well with this deck, and maybe I get lucky, we did not break it. We do not think we broke it. And if the stars line up and we made a good choice, then that's great. I'm not saying we're idiots and we don't know what we're doing at all. I'm just saying there can be no narrative where we think we broke it, because that is not accurate, and that I'm willing to get that right on tape.
Respect.